Wokes on air, Wokes on air, Wokes on air. This is the 10th episode starring Chidubem Okechukwu and Akim-Maria of the Wokes on Air series. Today we're talking about the subject of Nigerian religion. But first, let's say hello to Chidubem Okechukwu. She's standing by. Chidubem, how you doing?
Hey, Nwokes.
What's going on?
Lovely to record again on time.
As always.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just coming back from Nigeria, aren't you?
Yep.
How's the motherland?
It's lovely.
That's wonderful to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you know, we're talking about religion today. Let's just kick off real quick for the listeners that are eager to hear the subject. We know that in Nigeria, there are, two religions that dominate the Nigerian landscape. Islam to the north, Islam, Christianity, and traditional religion to the west, southwest, and predominantly Christianity to the southeast. Notice I also mentioned traditional religions because when I was doing some research, I came across traditional religions, and I think it's worth a mention that traditional religions exist in Nigeria still.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it personally from a point of view of how these religions impact on Nigeria. The subject of religion is, should I say, unending. You know, you can't really package it into like one hour of conversation, let alone one podcast. So in fact, a lifetime. You can't package it into a lifetime. So to package it into one podcast is a little bit overambitious. And I personally coming at this conversation from a point of view where these religions impact Nigeria, how they impact Nigeria, and how we're meant to move forward with religions in Nigeria. Wokes, what do you think about religions in Nigeria?
I think that religion in Nigeria is a very dominating concept that continues to guide people's actions and their lines of reasoning. I find specifically that influences people's perspectives in government, policy making, and as citizens as well, even to a ridiculous extent sometimes. So, for example, think about when they introduced the ban on gay people, essentially, saying that any signs of homosexuality that are noticed are liable to many years of imprisonment. And I can assure you that that was a very morality-based decision that was not really, factored into any practical reasons per se, or more of something that was a choice factor of, the government not liking something and deciding that they were going to punish it because it wasn't up their street, essentially. And then again, it comes down to morality and religion and what we believe in. So whilst we're not a theocratic state, I find that religion does impact the way we reason a lot of times. The decisions that we make as a country, it impacts the way we look at things, our perspectives. And I think that's very interesting because on one hand, it can be a good thing because, it's good to have a moral standpoint as a group of people. It's good to not be easily led and stuff, and I appreciate that. But then on the other hand, there's elements to which, excessive reliance on religion does not really allow people to be progressive and to get in touch with the times and to be objective in terms of appreciating the fact that not everybody is religious. Because whilst we do have religions in Nigeria, we have Christianity and Islam, obviously, as the two dominating ones, and then we have other religious sects. The fact is, not everybody is religious, and we cannot force people that are not religious to be religious, as long as they're being good citizens and they're, staying within their line of freedom, not infringing anybody's rights and stuff like that. I find that we don't respect that. We are too quick to assume that there's this umbrella of religiosity that has to be basically shown on everyone, and regardless of whether they want to or not. And that's the part I disagree with, because I feel that sometimes it has affected our progress as a country in the way we've made decisions, because we have not been objective in making decisions. We've allowed our personal convictions to come into play, be it religion as a very prominent example. But yeah, Wokes, I don't know what you think, but and specifically the religion comes to mind, especially for me when I think about this, is actually Islam, because I find that growing up in the north for a couple of years, I found that all the riots and all the things that we had were based on people trying to differentiate themselves from Christians and to make a statement that they are not Christians and they will not tolerate any signs of Christianity that infringe on their personal space. I think that's a very aggressive way to assert yourself as a group of people, because obviously there's no tolerance in that, and that's very domineering. And I find that there are many other examples, maybe subtler examples of such things. Yeah.
I think that's a very good assessment, actually. It's hard to even disagree with anything you've just said. Not that I was even intending on doing that, but if you're just an objective listener listening to what you said, it's hard to disagree with you because that's the reality that I'm sure a lot of other people experience as well. A lot of violence, based on, well, not based on religion, because religion doesn't, in my own personal opinion, doesn't preach that, but with the excuse that they're being religious, acts of violence are carried out. And I just wanted to give us a backstory um, on what I researched with regards to religion. The definition of religion, according to Google, is a controversial subject in religious studies, with religious scholars failing to agree on any one definition. Now, even in um, the religious studies field, people are disagreeing on the definition of religion. Not to even talk about those people trying to apply it to their daily lives. How, if the intellectuals haven't necessarily come to a conclusive decision as to what religion means, how would an individual that's not necessarily engaged in studying what religion is, but rather carrying out the practices, how would they actually know what is guiding them? That's my own first question that comes up there. The Oxford Dictionary goes on to define religion as a belief in and worship of a superhuman, controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. Now, for the human mind, as we know, has its limitations, but at the same time is an infinite um, object of wonder, as I would describe it. But being able to fathom a superhuman or a god when, well, we're not gods ourselves, is something that I would say hasn't been pinned down by humanity as a whole, because there is, in my own experience, nobody that has come forward to actually say that this is what God looks like or anything. They only talk about their own personal experiences. They don't necessarily um, carry that idea or God and put it of God and put it into like a picture and try and project it on an individual. If they're doing that, for me personally, I try and avoid those kind of conversations, because it's not something that human history has been able to do, and I know that as one individual I can't do that myself or by myself. So why would I be able to conjure up an image of God? I don't. It's not something I've necessarily been exposed to. So the combination of not being able to do that, as well as not even understand what the intellectual aspect of religious studies is, causes a lot of confusion from my own assessment. Now, just going back to Nigeria, although I'm relating all I'm saying to Nigeria, but now specifically speaking about Nigeria, in Abuja, I noticed that there's religious structures there. Like there's a church that was built back in, I think, in the 1990s, where the then head of state supplied money to religious organizations like the Christian organization in Nigeria or Catholic organization in Nigeria and the Islam organization in Nigeria, and they built temples or places of worship, a mosque and a church, and these buildings I think are still standing today in Abuja, and it just goes to show the impact of religion in Nigeria. These structures are very beautiful. I've seen both of them, and um, they're they're incredible. They're incredible to be located in Nigeria, and yeah, something to be proud of. At the same time, you mentioned the violence that you witnessed, and people trying to
Mm-hmm.
dominate one religion,
In the north.
people
Yeah.
representing one religion trying to dominate other people in another religion. I'm getting the sense that Nigeria is a place where rivalry is a prominent thing. It's a place where uh people want to be better than other people, not in a way that always results in a healthy outcome. Like when you apply it to religion, you see how it can get violent. When you apply it to tribes, you can see how it can get violent. So there's a recurring pattern here where there's no spoken agreement or unspoken agreement where none of this rivalry will result in violence. And these are big entities. These are big institutions. Tribes are massive institutions if you think about it. Although like they're naturally
Mm-hmm.
occurring cultural institution, and religions are also a massive institution in Nigeria. When half of the country belongs to a certain group of religion or a certain religion, yes.
That's in
So,
religion, yeah.
so you can see how these large bodies, when they start to compete, they result in some seriously impactful scenarios, not always with a good consequence. So one of the things I would sense in Nigeria at this point in time is that things need to be like diluted quite a lot. Like institutions need to be diluted quite a lot. What people can belong to needs to be diluted quite a lot because the purpose, the idea of even concentrating these powers more is going to lead to more of these conflicts because we know it's going to lead to rivalry and it's going to lead to violence, as we've witnessed with the
Mm-hmm.
tribes and the religious examples. It's a situation where um, people need to actually. I think we need to take it into our own hands as individuals to try and correct these things, try and convey a positive message to another individual. I was before we started the podcast, I was reading up on um, kleptocracy, and this is I wish I actually read this article by Lovina John. She did a BA in politics in University of Leicester. I was reading her article. The title of the article is Political Corruption in Nigeria: Detecting the Symptoms of a Continual Cancer. What factors perpetuate continual political corruption within Nigeria? I wish I'd read this last week before
Mm-hmm.
the podcast because I would have had a lot more to say about the podcast. And
Integrity.
yeah, exactly, Nigerian integrity. And in it, she just talks about defining corruption in a proper way, and a number of other wonderful ideas. And I recommend that everybody reads this. But the idea of Nigeria being a kleptocracy is something that never really occurred to me. It's also a form of government,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily a good type of government because it doesn't necessarily cater for everybody. Um, I don't necessarily know that Nigeria might be a kleptocracy, could be a democracy still, but I would really, really go down or recommend that the idea of Nigeria being investigated as a kleptocracy be carried out by somebody, more knowledgeable than myself. I'm definitely going to continue my research on this, but it would seem that there is even incentive outside of Nigeria for things to continue the way they are. And how this ties into religion is that when a group of people that rule the country for so long, come from one particular part of the country, they're quite likely to be of a particular religion. When you know that Nigeria is divided into basically two religions, with a little sprinkle of a third traditional religion, it now becomes more of a traditional as well as a um, tribal argument in a way. It needs a lot of attention from all Nigerians, from all Nigerians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Thank
does. Yeah.
thank you for
I
listening.
think that I think that there's an element of human nature that wants to assert themselves. So people want to tell you what is right because they feel that they have a moral standpoint that is higher than yours. And I appreciate that there's a weakness inherent in human beings to always or to tend to do that. But I think sometimes we take it too far as a country in the sense that we put that to express that feeling before any logic and before the well-being of the greater population. So I feel like using religion to decide something like people's sexuality and how it should be expressed in the country is just ridiculous because no country does that. Like the United States didn't do that. Even if you cause some controversies with like when Obama was president and he was in power, but still it's like other countries are moving forward there. There's nothing like telling people, to do this or not do that just based on religion, especially when you're not operating in a theocratic state. So it's not like this. You're not assuming that there's a blanket belief system in the country that is so diverse and has so many people in it. But we still have that mentality in Nigeria, and I think it's very ridiculous because I'll give you some examples that don't even have anything to do with politics. Like, for example, like you have some go to some Nigerian churches, right? So everybody knows what marriage is and the rights. I would assume that everybody knows like the basic tenets of how a marriage ceremony is conducted, what makes it legal, etc. And you believe it or not, works like some people actually cannot be wed in certain churches in Nigeria because they are pregnant. And I think that's crazy. I think that's kind of ridiculous because in a sense it's like, so if you go on to the religious elements of what it means, what the sacrament of marriage is, and what you're trying to conduct in that ceremony of trying to marry a couple together, and then you go on to like the immorality of having been defiled certain rules of what relationship should be like in the religious sense, and you try to marry those two things. You're not actually in a position to stop it. For me, it's very silly because it's like someone comes to you, right, and they say that they want to seal a contract in a relationship based on whatever reason that they give, and it happens that they have carried out certain things in the way that you do not approve of, but then because of that, you want to then deny them the greater picture. Just how I'm saying, it's like that's how deluded we get sometimes, just in that need to assert that power that we have, that moral standpoint that we want to uphold. I think sometimes we do things that are just ridiculous. And that is a microcosm of how bad it can get. Like, look at it on a bigger level, then again, you have the homosexuality example. Like, how can you say that you want to put people, potentially, ban people in the sense that if this happens and you're caught, you're liable to so many years of imprisonment? How is that a state offense to be homosexual? And the fact that people actually agree, like, it's something that people were proud of. Like, oh yes, I come from a country where this was said. That's really good. It shows that we don't take nonsense. And I'm like, no, it shows that you're intolerant, and you're unwilling to find proper solutions to things. You're focused on things that are not important, and you're not finding the right ways to tackle them. And those are not the issues that you even have to face right now. So it's like, I think that in that sense, I don't agree with the way we've used our religion to guide our country, because it's not like that was never meant to be the main focus, to create a system where people are judgmental and then they're making stupid decisions based on that. I think we have clouded our vision with this whole religion thing, and I think that in general, when I think of Nigeria and I think of religion, I just think of the many ways in which such a beautiful thing has detracted us in different aspects of the running of the country. But yeah.
Well said. With regards to people's sexuality, I don't necessarily know how that's going to affect the political position of an opponent
I don't
or
understand it
the
as well.
economic well-being of a country. But there's some people that are just against the idea of it for their own personal reasons. I don't know what they are. As an individual, my motto when it comes to life, not even just the aspect of the human, but life generally, is if somebody is doing something without harming someone else, then in fact, like, nobody is being harmed by what somebody is doing. I don't see why somebody can't carry the action out. If in terms of okay, let's if we did an exercise here where we examine, okay, it's not the individual that will get harmed. It would be the person's family. If the person is the only son, or whatever the case may be, or the person is the only daughter, or whatever the case may be, there'll be a chance where there wouldn't be a continued biological element to that family. I don't necessarily know that people want to be this way, but I imagine that a lot of Nigerians think that, they're proud of the family, they're proud of their status in society, and it would bring shame upon them, or it would stop them from um, but continuing their family biologically. I don't necessarily see how that now constitutes a crime.
Exactly.
It's yes, it's a tragedy, that maybe somebody's family wouldn't continue because they only have one son
But how is
or
that
one
the
daughter.
concern of the states that's
Exactly,
involved?
it's not the concern of the states. It seems like, okay, fair enough. If like maybe 100 families now went down that route, then that's a situation. But that scenario is highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely, and
Unlikely.
it's, I don't know what that has to
And
do with
let's not
politics
kid
or
ourselves.
economics. To be
We
honest.
know that I mean there's homosexuality, but we know that homosexual couples
Mm.
are opting for ways to use
Adopt
science
kids.
to have kids. Like
Exactly.
you know, like
Adopt
they're
or
looking for
even,
control their generation. They're just finding other ways that we don't
yeah.
approve of. But there are still ways. So it's like people are still having families as
Hmm.
homosexual couples. Definitely.
I
Definitely have families.
I've not really looked into the argument of why they passed that as law or whether it's not law anymore. I don't necessarily know.
It's
But
just ridiculous.
from a
Yeah.
personal perspective, I don't necessarily know any Nigerian that's going through that hardship of, you know, be having not having to disclose their sexuality as a result of breaking crime or whatever the case may be. But if there's anybody out there, I definitely would
I hope you have
understand
a lot of
their
strength to
strength,
continue.
exactly, that
Oh.
kind of situation. So yeah, it's, in Nigeria especially, it's, I can't even imagine what somebody must be going through in that kind of situation. But God willing, they'll be able to persevere and know where to stay safe, and whatever the case may be. Because at the end of the day, this life,
Because you do stay safe because
mm,
it's a very aggressive standpoint.
exactly, with this rivalry, and we know how people react to certain things regarding belief. Anything can happen. But with regards to Nigerian religion as a topic, I think we've gone through a good conversation with this one.
Yeah, I think we have. I think definitely like there's so many things to say because religion is such a multifaceted topic. But without getting excited and going off track, I think we've said things that are relevant to what I'm thinking about.
I think the a way to end this podcast would be just to say that I personally imagine that religion preaches togetherness. Is not something that would be trying to divide people or trying to damage people. I guess the damaging is coming as a consequence of the way religion was viewed in like earlier periods of humanity.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can get beyond this idea and go forward with a positive religion, as it were.
I
And
don't think to make it religion isn't was never existed to encourage self gratifying decisions. Definitely
explain.
not. Sorry.
Explain.
So in the sense that just giving the examples I gave, like any decision that people are making to feel better about themselves, using religion as the weapon to explain that is never something that religion was never meant to be used for. If you're using religion to feel better than person B and to make such rules against person B,
Oh, I
that
see.
person B looks like a bad person and you look like a good person with a good moral compass on your head, I don't agree with that because that's not the point of religion.
Yeah,
That's not what God teaches us.
that raises the story of the hypocrite in in the Bible. When I remember reading people that prayed in public just so that they would be seen to be praying in public. That was just, and
The
that's
guy praying out loud and the guy praying quietly.
exactly.
That
Well said, Wokes. On that note, if you like this podcast, please click the like button. If you loved it, please subscribe. There's a bell notification, ding that, and you receive updates as to when we upload the latest content of Wokes on Air. All in all, episode 10, Nigerian religion. I'm done.
I'm done too. Been a long day.
Been a long day. Relaxing that. So everybody listening, thank you for listening, and we look forward to catching you next week. Have a great week.
Have a great week.